This video will help you get started in exploring The Last House on the Hill web edition, a multigraph about the Berkeley archaeologists at Çatalhöyük, the Bach project, at this famous 9,000-year-old Neolithic mound settlement in central Anatolia, Turkey. This video focuses on the work of the Bach team and the 7-year history of the project. It is a guide to understanding the way in which we collected and documented the materials that you will find in this multigraph. If you want to read more on these topics, look at chapters 1 through 4 of the printed monograph of The Last House on the Hill. The archaeological site of Çatalhöyük comprises 2 mounds. This is the earlier Neolithic East Mound that was the main focus of both the 1960s excavation and the renewed since 1993 project. The northern eminence of the East Mound was untouched by archaeologists until 1993, when its top 10 centimeters were scraped off, revealing this pattern of walls. This was to be the north area of excavation. You can see in the southwest of the East Mound the excavation started in the 1960s. That was later referred to as the south area. The first house to be excavated in the north area was Building 1, started in 1995 by the Çatalhöyük Research Project. The next one was Building 3, the focus of the Bach project. Both Building 1 and Building 3, in a sense, are last houses on this part of the hill, since, unusually, they were never built over. Characteristically, the mud brick houses of Çatalhöyük were truncated, then filled in, and then built over, thus forming the mound. The 2 houses, Building 1 and Building 3, that were first excavated in the north area, are probably quite similar in age in terms of the East Mound's history, overlapping in their own history with each other and with the house below Building 1 called Building 5. According to James Mellart's original schemes, these 3 houses have been dated to the middle of the East Mound's occupation. That is his phases 6a through 7, about 7,000 to 6,500 BC. According to the new 2008 dating system at the site, Building 3 has been dated to phase N. The Bach project was actually born in 1996 with a visit to Çatalhöyük and the decision on its location next to Building 1. This lovely shelter, contrasting with the neighbouring one over Building 1, was constructed the following year in 1995 and became the iconic symbol of the Bach project. The Bach project comprised 7 excavation seasons of varying duration and one final sad day in 2004 of filling it in. In the archive of The Last House on the Hill web edition, you can choose a date within these date spans to see what was happening on that particular day, in a video or in an image or even a diary entry or an excavation unit. Inside the Bach tent, we started in 1997 to excavate the fill within the walls of Building 3 and 3 small rooms to its south, space 89, 88 and 87. Immediately we came across post-Neolithic burials of the late Roman period in the 3rd century AD. As we excavated one of the late Roman burials, feature 153 that you see here, we made the fortuitous discovery that it had cut through the many layers of the collapsed roof of Neolithic Building 3 that can be seen showing in the sidewall of the burial cut. It helped to make sense of the striations in the deposits that we saw in the surface of the excavation, just here. The roof is one of the very few instances of a preserved roof remains in the Near East. Its excavation was an important part of the 1998 season. Micromorphological analysis helped the interpretation that the roof was used for a large number of domestic activities, especially in the warmer seasons. In this interpretation, the ceiling is probably too high. Building the replica house gave us some important clues about this question, which you can read in chapter 22 of the printed edition of Last House on the Hill. During 1998, the roof took up a lot of our energies, but we also excavated the post-depositional fill to its south and to its west, retaining two cross bulks to create cross sections through these complicated deposits. As we did this, we were able to define two small partition walls, features 160 and 161, and between them the white plaster mass of what we interpreted as a screen wall, feature 155, that together separated space 86 in the east and the narrow western room, space 158. During the 1999 season, in the deposits of fill immediately above the latest floors, we came across two deposits that have been interpreted as possible deliberate ritualized acts of closure of Building 3. Both have been designated as clusters, and you can see the glossary for what that means, rather than features. Cluster 1 in the southern end of Building 3 is a cluster of large animal bones, especially shoulder bones or scapulae, possibly the debris of a feast. Cluster 2 is in the center of Building 3 at the southern end of the collapsed roof and comprises a carved cattle skull, a bucranion, and a hearth and two detached skulls. By the end of the 1999 season, we had reached the final floors of Building 3 and could see that the whole of Building 3 is encompassed in the Bach area. What we could see in 1999 was the situation in the second half of the life of Building 3, when the two small walls and screen wall divided the space that was encompassed by the four peripheral walls into two rooms, space 86 on the east and space 158 on the west. In space 86, 5 platforms were defined with a lower central floor area. In the new project directed by Ian Hodder from 1993, it was decided to excavate using the single context method, in which each depositional event is recorded as a separate unit and is excavated, wherever possible, in the reverse sequence of its deposition. The sequence of depositional events is visualized using the Harris matrix format of representation. This feature 617 is the final burial of Building 3, a 5-year-old child in a basket, and was discovered at the end of the 1999 season. This shows you the way the different units describe the sequence of depositional events in burials at Çatalhöyük. First, the cut or pit, creating an edge and a void. Then the body, in this case placed in a basket, then the fill of the pit, and finally its clay and plaster lid to mask its position on the floor. The time-lapse movie that you see here helps share the experience in 3 minutes of 32 hours of excavation. You can find the full movie in the archive of the Last House on the Hill web edition. You are encouraged to explore the persons category in the archive of the Last House on the Hill web edition. A person in the Bach project can have many roles. Most participated in some, if not all, field seasons of the project, either in the lab or the excavation site. In contrast to the 1960s project at Çatalhöyük, the local workers in the new project do not, as a rule, excavate. They screen and do heavy manual labor jobs. Excavation is in the hands of professional archaeologists, often from the world of contract archaeology, or advanced experienced students and researchers. The analytical work takes place on site in the labs at the compound by a large force of specialists who interact regularly on site with the excavators in the twice-weekly priority tours. The compound at the bottom of the East Mound is the hub of social and scientific activity of the Çatalhöyük Research Project. Here are bedrooms, laboratories, storerooms, kitchen and dining rooms. The size of the compound has grown even from this 2001 photo. You can read more about the compound in chapters 25 and 26 of the printed edition of Last House on the Hill. This is where a party is held almost every Thursday night before the free day, which is Friday. You might have to sign in to the archive of the Last House on the Hill web edition to view all the party photos. From 1997, the Bach project within the main Çatalhöyük project spearheaded a cataloguing system for photography and creating a digital image record, thanks especially to Michael Ashley. The 10,000 photographic images are embedded with rich metadata that enable them to be meaningful for many generations and ready for you to explore and download and reuse in the archive of the Last House on the Hill web edition. Thanks to the Çatalhöyük Research Project team that includes the Bach team, all the images are licensed with a Creative Commons license. Thanks also to Michael's and Jason Quinlan's rock climbing skills, we have been able to get a view that in prehistory no one would have seen, from directly above. Video documentation also played an important role in recording the everyday observations and discussions of excavators and specialists. A video for each working day of the project has been created so that you can relive the archaeological project, at least its working days, as it progressed, and what were mysteries earlier on became resolved as excavation proceeded, or as results came up from the labs. Smaller clips have been created for specific topics and features on a specific day, so that you can explore the progress made on a particular feature during the project. Some of the clips have been further remixed to create new videos that are also in the archive of the Last House on the Hill web edition. During the 2000 and 2001 seasons, progress was made in excavating and understanding the occupation of Building 3 and its changing configurations in the location of ovens and hearths, storage bins, floors and walls during its history. You can see the details of these in Chapter 5 of the print edition of Last House on the Hill. During these seasons, 7 more Neolithic burial events were discovered. One in the northeast platform, called Feature 631. 3 more in the north central platform, Feature 634, 644 and 647. And the 3 earlier child graves in the central floor area, Features 648, 756 and 757. You can read the details of the burials in Chapter 13 of the printed edition of Last House on the Hill. By the end of 2002, we had excavated down past the earliest floors to the underlying midden below the house and were ready to begin building up the life history of Building 3. You can see from the video collection in the archive of the Last House on the Hill web edition that we had been working to understand the sequence of phases in the house life history since 2000. This drawing from James Mellart's book and the replica house that you can read about in Chapter 22 of the printed edition of Last House on the Hill will help visualize life inside Building 3. This is also the topic of of the Getting Started presentation called The Life History of Building 3 that you can find in the Last House on the Hill web edition. By the end of 2002, we had reached the earliest floors of Building 3 and realized that in the early part of its history, before the partitioning walls in phase 4A, Building 3 comprised one large room that we designated Space 201. Partitioning transformed this space into the two rooms, Space 86 and Space 158. We grouped the changing configuration of features into three zones within Building 3. The south and west zone, referred to sometimes as the dirty area of the building, was the center for domestic activities around food and resources. This zone was further divided into two subzones, a zone encompassing the small western room, Space 158, and the southwest platform, feature 169, that these were a focus of food preparation and storage, and a zone that included the south center lower area, which we sometimes refer to as the kitchen, and the southeast platform, feature 167, which was the location for the ladder entrance. The northeast zone, referred to sometimes as the clean area of the building, comprised the white plastered platforms, features 162, 173, and 170, that were the location for burials and presumably non-domestic activities. The central floor zone is a lower area connected directly to the kitchen. This acted as a transitional zone between clean and dirty areas and was also the location for child burials. These are the 8 phases of occupation of Building 3. 2 phases not represented in this illustration are the phase of closure and abandonment, phase 5A, that is included in the separate supplemental image that can be perused at your leisure, and the phase of post-Neolithic burial of late Roman visitors or occupants of Çatalhöyük. The aim to construct the life history of Building 3 hugely refined the scale at which the excavation was recorded, but it also added time and skilled labor into the equation. However, the detailed life history of the building is the reward, as you can perhaps see in the Getting Started presentation called The Life History of Building 3 in this same Last House on the Hill web edition. Another focus of 2002 was the excavation of the small rooms, Space 87, Space 88, and Space 89. Space 87 turned out to be very complicated. Not only is it clearly part of a larger building to its south and west, which was excavated later in 2012, and you can read about this also in the Getting Started presentation on the life history of Building 3. But the platform that took up most of the space that we excavated covered at least 9 burial events, more than the total number of burials in Building 3. Most of 2003 was taken up with the study of the walls, the technology of building materials, and house construction, including the properties of bricks and mortar that you can read in Chapter 6 of the printed edition of Last House on the Hill. We also made the spectacular discovery that the strange pit in the northeast corner of Building 3 that had been a mystery ever since 1999 was in fact a doorway that we called Feature 633 in the east wall of Building 3. It's fun to follow this mystery from when in 1999 we had no idea how to make sense of the northeast corner of Building 3 up to 2003 when we finally discovered that it was a door. You can do this by doing a search for Feature 633 in the videos of the archive of the Last House on the Hill web edition. The Bach project finished excavation in 2003, but the team continued on at Çatalhöyük for 2 more years, studying the materials and preparing their publication. After all the deposits, floors and walls of Building 3 and spaces 88 and 89 had been removed, on August the 2nd, 2004, we also had a ceremony of closure for the project as seen in this movie.
Okay, so I'm going to put this down here. Okay guys, it's all yours.
The empty gap left by the removal of the buildings was filled in again. The shelter was removed, and in the end it was very difficult to see where all the 7 years of activity had been. And by 2008, when the proud new North Shelter covered the whole of the old North area, including Building 3 and the new 4040 area to its south, the tourists walk by the Bach area and have no idea of the 7 years of vibrant life that once filled the area. And that is one of the reasons that we have created the web edition of Last House on the Hill, so that we do not forget.